Okay, cool. I think I've got all of this set up. Just want to double check my levels here. All of that looks good. Cool, cool, cool. All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you happen to be. My name is Christopher Harrison. You can find me basically on any social platform as Geek Trainer. And today I'm really excited to talk about Flask. Flask is actually one of my favorite little web platforms. You've probably heard me talk a fair bit in the past about Django. Django probably being my my absolute favorite, but I really like Flask, and we'll get into all the reasons why and so forth here in just a couple of minutes. But I do want to level set before we get started here. So the first thing that I want to mention is I am going to assume some level of HTML experience, and I am going to assume Python experience. So I am going to assume that you've done Python at some point in the past. The second big thing that I want to highlight here is that while I am going to have an agenda that I'm going to flash up here on the screen, this is very much going to be a coding focused presentation. So we're going to walk through an example. We're going to walk through creation of a website, how you might set up a little bit of a data-driven site, how you could allow somebody to add in information, display it out, and things like that. So sort of the common structure that you would think about when you're thinking about creating kind of your first web app by using Flask. Now, through that, I'm going to be doing all of my demos live. You may notice every now and then I'm going to fire up the documentation. I'm partly using that as a presentation tool, so that way you can start to see like where you might find certain bits of information and so forth. But it also definitely means that along the way, I'm probably going to make a mistake. I'm only human, but I'm going to do my absolute best as we go through this. So yeah, so that's basically it in a nutshell. So let's go ahead and get rolling here. So with that, what you're going to notice over on the right-hand side here is our basic flow today, what it is that we're going to be doing. So we're going to start off with why Flask. We're going to do the installation, do our hello world, set up a basic data model, add in some routes, talk about how to set up web pages, how to do our index, play around with forms, add in a database, set up some links, and then eventually deploy all of this out. So that is the basic flow that we're going to be going through. Please, by all means, feel free to ask questions as we go. I'm going to do my best to monitor the chat window over there and bring up anything that's highlighted. And I also have my esteemed colleague Megan as well, who's there to help answer any questions that you might have as well. So please, please, please do speak up. This is really designed to be interactive. I want to hear your questions. It's just going to be a little boring if it's just me sitting in my office and talking to a monitor here. So I need human interaction. So by all means, please feel free to ask questions. Okay, so without any further ado then, let's talk a little bit about Flask and what Flask means. So Flask is, as they mention here, it's a micro web framework. So let's talk a little bit about that for just a second here. So what's great about Flask and where Flask really shines is the fact that it is going to do what it needs to do and literally nothing else. And so by that, what I mean is it's going to be a web server. It's going to give me the ability to do basic things like set cookies, set up routes. It's going to give me a really nice little templating engine. But after that, it's very much just going to get out of the way and let me do whatever it is that I'm wanting to do. And if we contrast Flask with probably my favorite web framework, which is Django, Flask does not do out of the box all of the different things that Django is able to do. Django has a full templating engine that will actually generate HTML for you. It will generate forms for you. It has a full ORM or object relational mapping system that's built into it. It has this wonderful little admin page that's available right out of the box. It has authentication and authorization built right in. And I can literally turn all of those different things on by either just setting a flag or with just a small handful of lines of code. And that's wonderful, and that's powerful, and that's great. But the problem with Django is the fact that there is a little bit of a curve, a learning curve to get into it. And you sort of have to do things the Django way, that it's not necessarily as flexible as you might hope, and it really is designed for a specific use case, which is going to be that normal situation where I've got a database back here and I want a web front end, and that's what I'm looking to do. And that's great, and I love that. But what happens if what I'm looking to do is just create a website that's maybe going to be a front end to some REST calls, that maybe I've got an AI service, or maybe I've got an ML model. All I want to do is just create a web front end for that. And that's it. So I don't need all of these little bells and whistles out of the box. I just need a basic web front end here. And this is really where Flask shines. That Flask will do what you want it to do, and then basically just get out of the way and let you do you. It will let you then focus in on the services that you're trying to provide, and not ask you to do things a very specific way. And so that's really why I love Flask, and that's where Flask, I think, really shines, is if what I'm just trying to do is create a basic web front end for some services that I've got. And that's what Flask is really going to do for us. Now, that being said, I'm still going to go ahead and focus in a little bit on a data-driven website here. And the reason that I'm doing that is because I want to highlight the fact that you can do this with Flask, and because it will also give me the opportunity to then highlight a couple of very popular plugins, or libraries rather, that you would use with Flask. It will also give me the opportunity to talk a bit about routing, and it will give me the opportunity to talk about how templates work in Flask. So it gives me just a really nice opportunity to do a nice lap around Flask. So now then, I apologize for not answering all of the questions. Sort of the this is live thing there. It is live. I just wanted to get through all of that before I kind of went back and answered the questions. The question about the video from Tuesday, is it going to be added? It is going to be added. It's just wound up being a little bit delayed. It's a whole long story yeah, we'll leave it at that. But I am going to go back and do that. I also do want to highlight real quick, Ashish mentioned WSL, which is Windows Subsystem for Linux. You are going to notice that I'm going to be using WSL. You do not need WSL to do Python development on Windows. You could just do it directly. I personally prefer to do my dev using WSL, and the reason for that is because at the end of the day, Python is just built for Linux. It just is. And so being able to work with it in sort of its natural habitat excuse me, to work with it in its natural habitat, so to speak, is just fantastic. So I'm a huge fan of WSL. I'm going to be using WSL, but it is actually going to be seamless because everything that I'll be doing will actually be right through Visual Studio Code. So I am using WSL behind the scenes, but it's not going to make a difference in anything here. Okay, cool. So with that then, let's go ahead and take a look at how we're going to do our installation here. So I'm going to bring up Visual Studio Code. And as I mentioned, I'm going to do everything in here. Now, there's nothing up my sleeves except for my arms that I didn't do anything here that is fancy at all. All that I did is I simply created a folder, and then I opened that up inside of Visual Studio Code. So I did not precede this with any information or pre-install anything. All that I've got here is just simply a folder. So I'm going to create a real quick file here that I'm going to call requirements.txt. And this is where I'm going to list all of the libraries that I'm going to need. And I'm going to type them all out in one shot here. So the first one that we're going to need, of course, is Flask. You kind of probably expected that, I'm going to assume. So we are going to need Flask. We're also going to need a couple little additional libraries here. So I'm going to grab SQL Alchemy. For those of you that are not familiar with SQL Alchemy already, SQL Alchemy is going to be an object relational mapper. So it's going to give us the ability to work back and forth between data objects and a database behind the scenes. So we'll see all of that as we go, but that's what that library is going to do for us. As part of that, I'm also going to grab the MySQL driver, because when we go to deploy this, we are going to use MySQL on Azure, by the way. More on that later. But I am going to go ahead and grab that library now. I'm also going to grab a little forms helper that's available called Flask WTF. That is sadly the name of it. I'm going to say here real quick that whenever we're thinking about naming things, we should always think about inclusivity. That's probably not a good name, but it is a popular library. It is the name, and I'm just going to roll with it. So there it is. And then last but not least is going to be python.env. .env is a wonderful little library for putting our keys someplace. That one common mistake that developers make is they will publish usernames and passwords out to, say, GitHub. Your security tip for the day: as a general rule, publishing usernames, passwords, keys, connection strings, things like that to a public website in clear text, generally speaking, bad idea. Don't do that. So you are going to notice that I'm going to use .env here to help me avoid doing exactly that. We'll talk more about .env as we go. So that's going to be all the libraries that I'm going to need. I'm going to go grab a terminal window here, and I'm going to create a virtual environment, Python 3.8, venv, and then I'm going to activate that. Venv bin activate. I'm going to try and pull this up real quick in the background here. YouTube user geek trainer. I did actually do a video on virtual environments. Just going to see if I can pull that up real quick here. See if I can't find it, and I can't. Yeah, I'll have to go back and look a little bit later. But anyway, I did do a video on virtual environments. So if you're interested in digging into that, then I could go ahead and pull that out. If you're getting a Python 3.8 not found, just use Python 3. That should actually work just fine. So yeah, cool. All right. So now that I've got everything listed, I'm going to go ahead and do my install, take R, and then requirements.txt. And that will go ahead and install all of my libraries here. And so now all of that is good to go. Okay. So now that's really it. That is that's the installation there. I do want to highlight real quick up here, I used Python 3.8. I actually have Python 3, Python 3.7, Python 3.8 all installed on my system. And I just went ahead and just used Python 3.8. If you just use Python 3, if you're on Linux, Mac OS, then that will work just fine. On Windows, it's actually just going to be Python, and away you would go from there. Okay. Cool. So now I'm going to go ahead and do our hello world, because of course this would not be a proper coding demo if we didn't do hello world here. So I'm going to start this off by saying from Flask import Flask. And then I'm going to say app equals Flask, and then name, and that's just going to be the system name of the app here. By the way, they're mowing the lawn in the background. Unfortunately, Thursday morning for me, which is where I am right now, is always when they come out and do landscaping in our little neighborhood. So I hope that the noise in the background there isn't bothering anybody. So I apologize for that. They should be gone in about 10 minutes, but there it is. Okay. So app is going to be, well, it's going to be our Flask app. This is sort of going to be the core to everything that we're going to be doing. And we're going to work with app for a couple of different things here. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to use this to create what's known as a route. So one big thing, if this is your first time doing web development, that you want to take a look at is the fact that there really isn't any magic to how a web application works. That at the end of the day, it's really just like an app that you might have on your phone. That when you think about an app that's on your phone, what's going to happen is you're gonna hit buttons, or you're gonna slice fruit, or whatever it is that you might be doing, and each time that you hit a button or something like that, you're expecting something to happen. And if you're going to be developing that app, you're basically just going to go in and tie in some code and basically just say, well, when a user clicks on this button, I want to run this bit of code. A web app works the exact same way. The only real difference here is that instead of a user clicking on a button, what's going to happen is the user is going to indicate what it is that they want to do based on the information that's going to be in the address bar. So if you go to, say, bing.com/maps, that /maps is going to indicate, hey, I want to see maps. And so there's going to be a little bit of code that's going to execute behind the scenes on the Bing servers that's going to go, oh, this user wants to see map information. Let's run the appropriate code to send down that map information. So that's what's happening there. We're going to do that exact same thing here. That's what routing is all about. That a route is where I'm going to say, well, if a user types in this particular URL, I want to run this little bit of code. So right now, I'm going to say, if the user just goes to /, if they just go to the root of the application, then I want to run some bit of code. What do I want to run? Well, I want to run this little function that I'm going to call index. And on my index, for right now, I'm just going to say return hello world, because of course I'm going to do hello world. Again, it's a, starting application. So I'm going to go ahead and save this here. And now I'm going to go ahead and do two real quick things before I run this. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to set a real quick system variable. I'm going to say export Flask env equals development. What that's going to do is that's going to enable the debug server for Flask. And what that's going to mean is that every single time that I do a save, it's going to reload my application. I'll still need to refresh my browser and do all that good stuff. But at the very least, every time that I save my code, this is now going to update itself. So that's what that's going to do for me right there. Cool. So I'm going to do that. And then, hi, Jan. I'm going to go ahead and say Flask Run. Cool. So what you're going to notice when I do Flask Run is that it's going to tell me my debug mode is on. And then you're also going to notice that it's going to tell me that it's running on port 5000 here. So if I come over to my browser and let me now go to localhost :5000, what you're going to notice is, sure enough, we now have hello world. This is now an official programming presentation. We've done hello world. Woohoo! Okay, so from here, of course, we want to get a little bit fancier. So we now have proven that we've got Flask installed. We now know that Flask works, and we're all set and ready to go. We're now ready to start building up our application from here. So Mr. Ravi asks, on Windows, getting this error message, export is not recognized. On Windows, it's going to be set. Env equals development. Okay. And then Ashish, I don't know how much debugging I'm going to be able to do live here, but I'm going to do my absolute best. But for Ashish, yeah, what you're going to want to do is say set Flask app equal to app.py. And that should do the trick. Okay, cool. All right. So now let's go ahead and start down the path of creating an application that's going to be able to work with data. So what we're going to want this to do is we're going to want to be able to list out all the items. We're going to want to be able to create brand new items and get details on an item. So that's really where we're going to go with all of this. So I'm going to start off by setting up the backend server, setting up all of the roots and everything else. And then I'm going to turn my attention to the front end and turn my attention to all of the templates. So that's going to be the flow that I'm gonna work through here. So let's start off by creating our basic data model. Now I'm going to come back and continue to iterate on this as we go forward. But for right now, I'm going to say class dog, and then I'm going to say def init self name, and then I'm going to say self name equals name, just like that. Cool. So all that I did here is just create a basic class. Try that again in English. All that I did here is just create a basic class. So there's no nothing overly fancy that's going on there. So I now want to start setting up my application here that I want to be able to list everything. So list all the dogs that we have. I want to be able to create a dog, so add a new dog to the registry. And I want to be able to get the details for a dog. So those are going to be the three core operations that I'm going to add into my application. And in turn, those are going to be the three routes that I'm going to create. So on the list everything, the route that I want to use for this is going to be simply dogs. So you're going to notice that it's just going to be /dogs. So if that's what you come to, then we're going to run this bit of code right here. I'm going to say def dogs index, and then I'm going to say for right now return all dogs. I'm going to update this here in just a moment, but for right now I'm just going to leave it like this just because I want to talk about something real quick. You're going to notice the name of the function here, and you'll notice the way that I named this is I said dogs, which of course is going to be like our category, underscore, and then the operation. So in my case, index. And index is sort of that default entry point that you're going to go to for any portion of the application that you're building. I do want to highlight that if you think about an application, we're going to be doing something that's going to be very small. But needless to say, your application can get relatively big, and it could get pretty big pretty fast. And so in our app, we're just going to do everything inside of app.py. But obviously for a more complex application, you're going to want to be able to break this out into different files and things like that. And so what I want to highlight here, and I'm just going to point it out just for your use later on, is Flask also supports this little thing called blueprints that would allow you to take different portions of your site and offload them into separate files. And so that can really help as your application starts to get more complex, as you've got more going on, etc. Again, for what we're going to be doing, one file, everything will fit just fine. It'll work, but if things are going to start to get more complex, you're going to want to take a look at blueprints, and that's all that I wanted to highlight there. So I just wanted to point you at that so that way you had a little bit of a next step from here. Okay. Speaking of next steps, besides taking a sip of coffee, the next big thing that we want to talk a little bit about here is this concept of templates. Now we are going to see how to build a template in a little bit, but at a high level, what a template is going to be is it's going to be an HTML file that will serve as a template. If you're familiar with what a Jello mold is, and I'm sort of showing my age by saying that because I don't know whether or not Jello molds are actually a thing. If you're not familiar with a Jello mold, it's basically you pour Jello into it, and then it's a shape. So it's like a mouse or whatever it is that that it might be. So the ice cube chase, yeah, there you go. That's an even better example. So you pour the water into the ice cube tray, and then you let it freeze, then pop it out, and then all of that's going to take the appropriate shape. So your template is basically like your ice cube tray, and the water would then be your data. So what we're going to do here is we're going to set up some data, and we're going to pour that into our template. So the template is going to be built by using HTML and then a special little language that again, we're going to highlight. We just need to pour our data into it. We're going to go ahead and highlight our template and pour the data. We'll go ahead and build the template itself a little bit later. So I appreciate you. I'm going to go function 1, 2, 3, 4 about the Jello mold reference, but yeah, not everybody's necessarily going to be in the right age group for that. Okay. So I'm going to go back up to the top here, and I'm going to add in a reference to our render template. What render template will do is it will ask me what the name of the template is, and then ask me to provide some data. So the return here is now going to be render template. It's going to be the name of my template, which in my case will be dogsindex.html. And then it's going to ask me for my my dog. Sorry, I'm just gonna real quick do this. I know I don't need new. I'm gonna fix that in a second. Okay, there we go. Okay, so what I did real quick is I created a Python list. Don't worry, I'm going to offload this to a database a little bit later. Just starting with the list for right now. Set up a couple of items inside of there, and then I'm going to use that down below. Yeah, I don't actually need the word new. Python, I think, is about the only, well, at least it's the only programming language that I use. Oh, thank you. That's what it is. I got so focused on that. There we go. Okay, that looks a little better. See, we're really cooking here. So so Python's about the only language that I use that doesn't have new for a constructor, so it just always throws my brain here. So that's what's going on up there. All right, coming back down here to render template. So the two things that I want to highlight about render template, number one is that we're going to point at where our template is. Again, don't worry, we'll get to that in just a minute here. And then the second thing that we're going to have is we're going to indicate our data. So we're going to give it a name, and then we're going to provide the data there. So again, we're going to come back and take a look at our templates. But for right now, I'm going to keep focusing in on my routes. Okay. Dogs create and def dogs create and okay, and then I'm just gonna type this in, and then I'm gonna go backwards here in a second. Don't worry, I'm going to explain my syntax, I swear. Okay, so let's talk for a second here. For right now, for my dogs create, I'm going to leave this the way that it is. Now I'm leaving this the way that it is sort of on purpose because there's going to be a couple of other things that we're going to need to talk about here. So I just at least want to get the route set up here, and then we'll come back and continue to add into this. So for right now, I'm just going to leave that the way that it is. For my details one, what you're going to notice here is that I've now updated my route syntax to be a little bit fancier here. You're going to notice this spot right here where I'm saying int :id, and I'm doing that inside of angle brackets, which is sort of resembling what you might see in a regular expression if you're so familiar. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying this is going to be a parameter. So unlike up here where I said dogs/create, I'm now hard coding in create. The only way that that's going to execute is if somebody says, whatever the name of my website is, /dogs/create. That's the only way that's going to execute, period. But what happens if I want to be able to read some information out of that URL? I want to use that URL basically as a parameter. Well, that's exactly what this syntax right here allows me to do. That by using that int ID, this is now setting up a parameter. My parameter name is going to be ID, and the parameter type is now going to be an integer. And if you go check out the docs, you're going to notice that there's a lot of other things that you could accept inside of there as far as data types go. But it will do both an automatic validation, but also an automatic filtering. Because if you think about it, I could have a little bit of a problem here. Because how are we going to differentiate, say, create from anything that a user might type in here, which is really what a parameter is? So by me highlighting int there, now what I'm saying is this can only be integers, which is cool. So now that's all that can be inside of there. Now, if you remember back to what I said a couple minutes ago, I said that the way that a route works is it's going to indicate that we're going to call a function. So user types in a route or hits a link that's going to set that up, and we're going to execute some code behind the scenes. That code is going to be inside of a function. Now functions, as we all know, can take parameters. And so what you're going to notice is that I called on my route here that parameter of ID. And then you're going to notice right here that I've set this up as ID. So this will now automatically pass in whatever value is passed in up there into here. And we can actually see that when I get in and do a little bit of a demo later on, we could actually go in and just like print out the ID. You're going to notice we'll be able to use that a little bit later to go find the right dog, and so forth and so on. So once I get into here, that ID will be whatever it is the user typed in or whatever happens to be in the URL. The last little thing that I want to mention here, and by the way, if you have questions, please feel free to ask. But the last little thing that I want to mention here is you are going to notice I'll frequently say the user typing something in, and I'm not necessarily meaning that literally, because as we all know, the user could hit a link, they could, be using a bookmark. I mean, there's all sorts of different ways that the user could navigate to that URL. I'm saying the user is typing it in just for simplicity's sake, just to sort of convey the message there. But I do want to highlight the fact that it doesn't have to be a literally typed in URL, that it could be something that was redirected to, it could be something that they hit a link to, etc. I'm just saying typed in just as a little bit of a shortcut. What's the rationale for route name choice with / at the end? Okay. So this is a great question. So the question is, in a nutshell, what is the significance of the /? And this is a great question. Let me actually go grab the doc for this because I think the doc does a pretty good job of explaining it. In a nutshell, by my ending with the / what I'm doing is I'm effectively indicating that I'm creating a folder, as it were. And so it will then actually become available with or without that / that's there. And then that allows me to then start adding more items out onto it. So that's what the trailing / is all about. So they give you a really nice explanation in the docs, but that's really what it's all about. So if I have the / at the end there, effectively what I'm doing is in like file system terms is I'm creating a folder. So that way I'm now going to have sub items underneath it, such as create, such as being able to grab the details by passing in the ID. Without the trailing /, I'm basically now creating a file. So I'm now saying, hey, it has to be this. And if I said whack dogs, whack create, and then put a / at the end, that would actually be an invalid URL. Because create is, for all intents and purposes, a file there because of the fact that I do not have the trailing /. So that's a great question. So yeah, cool. So another great question. So are these all GET requests? So the answer is yes. Now, if you want to go in and indicate the verbs, and I was actually going to come back and do this with create, but I'll do it right now since the question was asked. The way that you do that is by indicating your methods. So by default, it is just all going to be get. But if you want to now allow other methods, then you could go ahead and do that by adding them in. So, post, put, delete, whatever else that you might be doing, you could go ahead and add that in here. In the case of create, and again, we're going to see this when we get here, but let me just go ahead and add the code in. Since the question was asked, let me just do it now. Okay. Just going to add in request up top here. Request is going to represent whatever it is that the user has sent up. So we could grab form data, we could grab query string data. In particular, we can also grab the method as well. So let's think about the normal life cycle of a form. So when we've got create, we're going to have an HTML form. So the user is going to be presented with a form. They're going to fill out the form. They're going to hit submit, which is then going to send all of the data back. The normal way that that's going to work is to have the form displayed the first time. That's going to occur on a get. So now I've got my form. I fill out the form, filling out the form. And then I'm going to hit submit. down at the bottom. And then what that's going to do is that's going to then send the form filled out back to the server. And the way that that's going to be sent back to the server is via post. So get basically means, hey, the user wants the form. Post basically means that the user has sent back the filled out form. So normally the basic flow inside of, say, create here would look a little bit like this, is it would say if request method equals post, then I would do something like this. So what you're going to notice is if the method is post, then now I know they've sent the form. So I'm going to go grab the data and, save that, do whatever it is that I need to do with the data, send it out to a service, whatever. And then I'm going to, return back a value or, do a redirect, which is what I'm doing in my case, or whatever it might be. If it's a get, then I know the user just wants the form, and then we'll just go ahead and just send them that form down. By the way, right up here, redirect. So Mastodon asks, no redirect to the newly created resource. We could absolutely do that as well. I mean, it's really just a matter of personal preference there. But you could absolutely go ahead and just redirect back to the newly created resource. Either way works just fine. So yeah. Cool. Okay. Any other questions? Just going to take a sip of coffee as a, stall tactic, and because I want a little more caffeine. Redirect dogs or dogs. Actually, either one would work. So you could have the trailing // not have the trailing // either one will actually work. For that. And the reason actually that either one will work is because of the fact that there is that trailing / that I can indicate that I want to go to a folder with or without that /. So sort of the same thing that's going on here. Either one would actually work for that case. So, and actually here, let me do this. Can I get straight to that? Here you go. There's the full information. Create isn't an int. Do routes? Yeah. So the question is how do routes resolve? So if we think about the way that we've set up our routes here, what we've done is we've created. Let me just come down here. So right now, here's, if you will, our routing table. So now we've got dogs, and underneath dogs, we've registered a create, and we've registered anything with an integer that we're now going to call ID. So the way that Flask is going to work is it's going to try to apply the most restrictive possible. So that in our case, because of the fact that we flagged one as an integer, and then we also flagged one specifically as create, we've now got a differentiation between the two. So that create will only work if we hard code, if we specifically type in CREATE for that. The second one will only work if we have an integer there. So it is going to apply the most restrictive whenever possible. Now, One thing that is always worth highlighting, and this is true universally, this is true with Flask, this is true with Django, this is true with ASP.NET, that routing can be relatively tricky, especially if you've got a complex application. There's this basic programming concept called KISS, keep it simple, silly. We'll just leave it at that. Keep it simple, silly, where it's very much a, hey, keep things as straightforward as possible. And when it comes to routing, that's especially true. Just try to keep this as straightforward as possible because of the fact that it can get away from you very quickly. So try to keep it relatively straightforward. And I would also say, don't be afraid to create maybe new folders and things like that. So yeah. So it can get away from you. You're going to notice here that we've now spent effectively 20 minutes or so, probably closer to 25 minutes, just talking about routing. So needless to say, routing is it's a big topic, and it's one that is going to require a little bit of care to work with. So hopefully that helps sort of set the stage for how it is that routing works in Flask, and setting up sort of like the core routes that you might need inside of an application. And I would also again highlight the fact that the docs do a pretty decent job of laying out how routing works. So absolutely go check all of those out as well. Okay, cool. All right, let's see. Where were we? Yeah. I've got that. I've got my create. I've got my details. Okay, cool. All righty. So let's now turn our attention to templates. So if you remember from the original there we go. If you remember from the first little demo that we did of Hello World, what we did is we just simply returned back a string value. And that actually works. Like, you can absolutely just return back string values and away you go from there. If you really wanted to, you could just start dynamically creating HTML inside of your route functions and return that. You could absolutely do that. Please don't ever do that. While yes, you could, there's two main problems with that. The first is the fact that your code is going to be overly complex. Bad situation. But the second reason is one thing that you always have to be aware of when you're working with a web application is security threats. And one very common security threat is where you will have some level of script injection, where basically what somebody will do is they will send information to your site to get it to execute, and then now it's their code that's running and not yours. That's bad. You don't ever want that to happen. And what's particularly insidious about something like that is it might not just be that the user has typed something into a form or typed something into a URL, that it might be something that they filled out through a form is now stored inside of a database, and then you load that data from the database, you trust that data. Don't do that. You trust that data, now you go to display it, and now again you're running malicious code. The TLDR on all of that, the too long didn't read on all of that, is basically don't trust anything that came from a user ever. And that could be from them typing it into a form, typing it into a URL, or if the user has put information into a database, never trust information that's coming back from the database. Now, you can go in through code and do a whole bunch of escaping and things like that. But if you use templates, templates will actually take care of that for you. So it's yet another advantage to using templates. So not only are you just going to get easier code, but you're also going to inherently get more secure code. So it's a win-win situation there. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a little file here that I'm going to call index.html. There we go. Yeah, safety first. Don't trust anybody. So I'm going to say index.html. Now, before I start creating my index.html for my dogs, let's stop and think about this for just a minute here. That if we think about a website, we're going to have a lot of very common components that we're going to want on our pages. So rather than copying and pasting across all of this, it'd be nice if we could set up a core template first and then have everybody inherit from that. And so fortunately, we can do that. So I'm going to say base.html. And I'm going to go ahead and create an HTML document built into VS Code. If you just say HTML5, it's this great little snippet that's built in. And it will just give you some core HTML. And so what you're going to notice is it's just HTML. There's nothing fancy about what's currently on my screen. Now, where I'm going to be getting into is this little thing. I just want to pull up the website here real quick. There we go. I'm going to get into this little thing called Jinja Templates. So Jinja Templates is the, oh, is that a plugin? I apologize, Mark. I could have sworn that was built in. I will openly admit that over the years, because I've been using Visual Studio Code for quite a while now, and I've got numerous extensions installed, and I really actually need to stop at some point and start removing some extensions because I've just I've got gobs in there that now I just can't remember if it's built into VS Code or if it's an extension. So I apologize if it turned out that was an extension. Okay, it is built in. Oh, okay, cool. All right. So, but anyway, let's come back over here to Jinja. So the Jinja templating engine is built basically by the same group that does Flask. And what's great about Jinja is that at its core, it's HTML. And if we contrast this with something like Pug, which is very commonly used with Express, Pug looks completely different. It doesn't look anything like HTML, which could be both a good thing and a bad thing, I guess, depending on where you are. I will openly admit I've been doing HTML in web dev for a very long time before I came across Express, and then in turn Pug. My brain just does not operate the way that Pug wants it to operate. I just really struggle there. I'll admit it there. I said it. Let's move on. Jinja, however, and I really like Jinja because of this, is it's at its core HTML. And on top of that, the syntax structure that it uses those curly brace as delimiters. And this is, of course, commonly used almost everywhere else. That if you're looking at, React or Angular or, almost anything that's going to be doing some form of code and HTML together, that curly brace syntax is pretty common. And so I really like that, because in that way, it means that my brain has to do less context switching, which is just, it's good for Christopher. It's all about me. So, so I really like that that functionality there. So you can see the basics of Jinja right there. But let's go back to our app and start adding this in. So what we're doing here is we're setting up the core template, the core ice cube tray, if you will, from which all other ice cube trays will be based upon. I think I've beat that metaphor into the ground now. So this is now going to become the outside. So our title is always going to be dogs. Our header here is going to be dogs, etc. So that's what we're going to have going on here. So that's always going to be there. So now what I want to do is I want to allow other templates to put their information into different places. And the syntax that we're going to use for that is this right here. Oops. There we go. So what I've done is I've set up curly brace %, and then I'm executing a little bit of Jinja code, if you will. So the keyword here that we're using is block. And what that's going to indicate is this is a block into which somebody else could pour information. And so when I come back to my index and I go, hey, I want to use this as my base, this is where I'm going to be able to put my information. I'm going to be able to say, hey, I want to put stuff right here. And the way that I'm going to indicate that, if I go over here to my index, yeah, it's a placeholder, is I'm going to say bloop, bloop, extends dogs base HTML. Okay. Just like that. I'm just moving it down just so that way they're next to each other. So that's what's going to happen, is that my my index is going to take dog index here and put that into this little spot right here. So let's see this in action. So let me just come back over here. So we'll move that all the way up. Because of the fact that we are in our debug mode, it should have automatically saved. And now what you're going to notice is that we've got dogs and we've got our dog index. So dogs was the H1 that was set up, that we put into our base template. And then dog index is where index is putting in its information into that placeholder. Now, I don't work with Tim. Sounds cool though. Okay, so now let me come back over here to my index. And what I want to do is I want to display all of the dogs. And if you remember, going back to our app.py, when I said render template, I went ahead and I passed in dogs. So dogs is now available to my template. Now, how do I get access to that? I'm glad you asked. The way that I get access to that is by doing this. I'm going to just type all of this out real quick, and then I'm going to go back and explain what's going on here. So, whoops, sorry about that. There we go. There's VS Code. Thank you for calling that out. I try to remember to switch back and forth, and unfortunately I will sometimes forget. So thank you for calling that out. I apologize for not calling that out, but that's okay. All I was doing was typing, so you didn't miss anything. So let's talk about the code now that I have. Okay, so this right here is all the code that that I just added in. So what you're going to notice is again HTML. So set up an unordered list, and now what I'm doing is I'm saying percent for dog in dogs. Now this is really Python. I mean, it's not Python, but it's Python. Like if I was going to create a for loop in Python, that's how I create a for loop in Python. The only difference is, of course, in Python, it's going to be based on how many index tabs happen to be, or how many tabs happen to be there. So we don't have that here. So instead, I'm going to say end for down below. So that's all that's going to mark the block there. So device asks, so this is basically like Django. It's very similar to Django. And again, it's one of the things that I really like about this is if you're familiar with Django, then coming over to Jinja, it's a very natural transition. There are some subtle differences between the syntax and so forth, but it is a very natural transition. So you're going to feel very much at home if you've done Django and you're looking to do something as Flask. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, Django took a diet. Make sure you go to dogs, Ashish. Okay. Now, the other thing that you're going to notice is the two curly braces here. Now, this is honestly something that threw me for a little bit of a loop, no pun intended, in trying to figure out when it is that I'm supposed to be using the curly percent and the two curly braces. So here's what it is in a nutshell. If I'm using the curly percent, what I'm doing is I'm indicating I want to run some little bit of Python or Jinja code. So when I want to extend from a parent template, curly brace percent. If I want to mark a block, curly brace percent. If I want to set up a for loop, curly brace percent. But if what I want to do is I want to just display text, that's where the two curly braces come in. And so what this will do is it will just take whatever happens to be inside of name and just display the text there. But if you remember to what I was talking about before, never trust anything that you get from the user. This will actually automatically do the appropriate escape for you. So that way I don't have to worry about bad data being inside of the dog's name. This will automatically strip that out and make sure that whatever it is that's going to be displayed there is going to be safe. So it's easier to write and it's going to give me better security. So yeah. Yeah, it you know, again, the resembles Ruby. It's really nice that way, that it does very much resemble a lot of different platforms. Okay, so now that I've got my code updated, if I rerun my page, now what you're going to notice is that we've got our dogs listed here, and it looped through and displayed each one there. So cool. All right. So now let's go ahead and see how we could start creating multiple dogs. Now, or adding in dogs. Now, one of the things that we do have to keep in mind is really actually two things. So first of all, is we actually have another security issue here. The security issue that we have is this little thing known as Csrf. Csrf stands for something, 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 something. It stands for cross-site request forgery, which is a very fancy way of saying that what could happen is somebody else could fake my form. And if they're able to fake my form, they could do a couple of different things here. That it's possible that they could maybe bypass some level of validation that I might have going on. It's possible that they could maybe denial of service, something that's going on behind the scenes, or they could do, all sorts of other potential bad things. And you can see a really nice write-up in the Wikipedia article that will talk you through all of this. The little bit of a challenge that we have with Csrf is that preventing it can take a little bit of work because it requires that you secure a token, you send the token down to the user, and that you expect that to come back from the user. So there's a little bit of code that's required here to help make all of it work such that it doesn't happen, such that this is secure. And, I'd much rather take advantage of something else that somebody else has built, somebody smarter than me has built, rather than trying to do this on my own. Because if I do it on my own, I'm not a security expert. I'll openly admit that. All that's going to happen is I'm going to make mistakes. So I'm going to use something that somebody else has built. And this is where the WT forms and the Flask WTF come into play. So first of all, the WT forms is a very common library used with Flask that will help give you a form object and just make it a little easier to interact with data to and from the user. The Flask WTF, again, bad name, we'll talk about that later, is going to actually take this and go one step further for us and include some little helper functionalities. And it's also going to automatically handle the security for us. Now, the first step to setting this up is to actually set up a secret key. Now, remember what I was talking about before? Typing in passwords into code, bad idea. Let's not do that. So this is where our .env is going to come into play. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a file called .env. And our file called .env is going to contain key value pairs that will automatically be set up as environmental variables. And so now all I need to do is make sure that this is not going to be uploaded as part of my source code. So maybe put this inside of git ignore, for example. Now, I'm going to openly admit that it's, actually, I'm just going to do it this way. I'm going to openly admit here that .env is not the most secure solution out there. Because after all, this is just going to be a text file that's going to be stored on my system. But for most applications, this is going to be very likely a good enough solution for you If you are looking to really go next level here, there are additional extensions that would allow you to encrypt your .env file. There's things like the Azure Key Vault that you could go ahead and use, and so forth and so on. What I like about .env is I find it walks kind of a nice middle ground of giving me some level of security, but also not being overly complex. So I'm a big fan of .env. And that's basically how it works. They also have .env for basically every platform that's out there. So I initially discovered that on Unload. Okay. Okay. Ashish, make sure that your folder structure is correct. A little bit later, I'll be pushing this up to GitHub, and you'll be able to just copy and paste and go from there. I apologize that that it's not working. It's very likely that you just missed the templates dogs, the dog subfolder there. Just make sure that that's there. Okay. So now let me go ahead and os get env. Oops. Env secret key like that. So that's my first step. Second step is let's go ahead and grab some libraries. So from my Flask, import Flask form. From WT forms, import my validators, and then from WT forms fields, import string field. Okay, so let's go ahead and highlight what we've got. Here. So we've got the Flask WTF, which is going to give us our Flask form, which we'll set up in a second here. We're going to have our validators, which will allow us to introduce validation into our form, and then we're going to have our different field types. And we'll make that available. You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to make this a little bit easier. There we go. Okay. Yeah, it comes with validators. Isn't that cool? I love it. Okay. So let me now go ahead and sneak down here, and I'm going to say class dog form. And this is going to inherit from my Flask form here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm now going to create the properties that I want on my form. So I'm going to say name equals, and I'll say fields string field, and I'm going to set up a label, and we'll just make this name. And I'm going to set up my validators, and this is an array. So I can say validators dot data required. So you've got to put some information in there. And then maybe validators dot length. Whoops. Yeah, I was right. Length. And then I'm going to say min equals, let's say 3, and then max, let's just say 20. Or 30 apparently. That's what's going to come off of my keyboard. Okay, so what did we just do here? What we did is we created a cool new form here that now has a field called name. It's going to have a label called label. And we've marked this as required. And we've marked this with a min-max of 3 and 30. Pretty slick. Now we're also going to see we'll be able to use this inside of our HTML in a few minutes, but I want to now get into our create here and use this inside of our create. So I'm going to say form equals dog form to create a brand new instance of it. Now, remember what I was talking about before? About my request method equals post and all of that, and how this is problematic, Csrf, all that good stuff. Remember that conversation? Well, fortunately, forms will actually take care of this for me. So what I'm going to be able to do is I'm going to say form.validate on submit. What validate on submit is going to do for us is it's going to check the Csrf token. It's going to go ahead and validate all the data. And it's also going to make sure that it's been sent up via post. So it's checking the token for us. So we know we've got secured data. It's going to execute everything on post. So again, you know, when we go to save the data, we want that on post because it's telling us that it's come back. And it's also going to validate the data. Now, Csrf asks the question, do validators work on the back end and front end? And the answer is yes. They actually work on both, with a little catch here. So the way that they're built is they're going to take advantage of the validation that's built into HTML5. So if for whatever reason the browser doesn't support HTML5, the validator isn't going to execute on the client. However, as anybody will tell you, you want to validate on both sides. You want to validate on the client. That's really just a performance thing, but you always want to validate on the server. Validating on the server is the actual security side of things, because that's always going to be guaranteed to run. So this will actually validate on both sides automatically for us. And so now I know that inside of that form, that name data, that is good data. I can now trust that data as much as I can trust any other data from the user. Do with that as you will. So now what I could go ahead and do is I could go ahead and say dog equals dog, name equals bloop. And then I could go ahead and say dogs dot append, and then add in the new dog. So move my comment up there. Cool. And so now that allows me to go ahead and read the data from the form. Okay. So how about creating the form then? Just going to make sure that I've got everything. I do. Okay, cool. So how about reading the data? So let me create a brand new create.html. Hi, Beldathis. Welcome, welcome. Okay, extends, and let's say base dogs, base HTML, bloop, bloop. And then, whoops. Okay, so what we've got here is we've got our initial setup for our form. And so what we're going to want to do inside of our form here, of course, is to create our form. Now, we mentioned before that little thing about the I knew I was going to forget something. I knew it. I need to make sure that I hand down my form. I forgot to do that. I apologize. There it is. Forgot to hand down my form. Okay, let's come back over here to my create. So now that form has been passed in. So what that form is going to contain is it's going to contain a couple of important pieces of information. The first thing that it's going to contain is that token. And so remember that what that token is going to do for us is it's going to make sure that the users actually come to my site to view my page. So I want to make sure that I've got that. That's all that you have to do. Boom, I've now taken care of Csrf. Check. Now what I want to do is start to build out the rest of my form. So I'm going to say div, and then I'm going to go ahead and go boop, boop, form.name.label. And then I'm going to say bloop, bloop, form. The sound effects help, by the way. Form.name. Okay, so what this is going to do here is this is going to display the label. So we'll say name. And then right here, this is now going to become the appropriate dialog. So if I had indicated that this was going to be a number, then it would be using the HTML5 of number. If I had indicated this is an email, then it would be an HTML5 of email. If I had indicated that this was going to be a file field, then it would actually go ahead and set up the HTML file dialog for me, etc. So it's taking care of all of that for me. I don't have to worry about that. So that will automatically create the appropriate HTML. Pretty slick. And so now I just need a button. Div button type equals submit save dog. Cool. All right. Now, let me go ahead and view the page here. If I go to create, what we're going to notice is that we now get our cool little form here. You'll notice that if I go to like save dog here, it does give me my little error message right here of please fill out this field. You may notice on the dialog that is an HTML5, so it is automatically doing that for us. If I then go ahead and say Sparky and hit save, now you're going to notice on the redirect that it did in fact add that, that in for me. So cool. Now, there's the form for you, Mark. Okay, cool. So now I've got my create all set and ready to go. All right. Now it's time to add in a database. Needless to say, you're not going to get very far in an application by setting up a list and storing everything inside of there. It's probably not going to scale really well. Having all of your data go away every time that your server restarts, probably not going to be well received by your users. I'm gonna guess, those types of things. So yeah, we probably want to make sure that that we've got a better setup here. So let's go ahead then and start to add in a database. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to use an object relational mapper or an ORM called SQL Alchemy. Now, specifically, I'm going to use this from the Flask SQL Alchemy. And the Flask version of SQL Alchemy is going to be designed to better integrate with Flask. And it's going to give me a couple of really nice little helper methods that I'm going to be able to take advantage of. So the first thing that it's going to want to know is where's our database. So I'm going to say app.config and SQL Alchemy database URI. Now, if you're wondering, well, where in the world are you getting that from? The answer is this is actually built in to that Flask SQL Alchemy. So this is something that it is automatically looking for. So if I go to like minimal application, you're going to notice it's looking for it right there. So it's just hard coded, hey, just give me this. And so as long as you set that, you're done. And so it just makes it a little bit easier rather than working with normal SQL Alchemy, which is going to require having to go in and set up full like, settings and so forth and so on. So it's a little helper. So I'm going to go ahead and then just say os.getEnv and do the same thing. And let me go into my .env and I'm going to go SQLite, demo. There we go. Okay, so this is now going to be where my location is, or where my database is rather. For those of you not familiar with SQLite, SQLite is a, well, light version of a relational database that's all just file-based. So it's pretty slick there. So there is my, there's my database call. So now what I want to do is I want to update our dog here such that it will now use our database. Now I'm going to comment this just to leave it behind, but also just to highlight the fact that it's still going to look relatively similar. So I'm going to say db dot, oops, I forgot one little step here. db equals SQL Alchemy db. So this is actually going to create the object, connect to database. Okay, sorry about that. Forgot that one little step. There we go. Now I'm going to go ahead and say db.model. So what this is doing is it's inheriting from model. So it will automatically get everything from my from model. So that way it will automatically have the constructor, and it's also going to have a couple of cool little helper functions that are going to be grafted onto it. So I'm going to set up my ID. And sadly, I don't get IntelliSense here, which makes me sad. I'm just so used to having IntelliSense. Primary key equals true. And then I'm going to say name equals db column, and then db string 30, and nullable equals false, unique equals true. Okay, cool. And just for readability, I'm just gonna I don't know if that makes it more readable or not. And I'll leave it like that. Okay. Belathas asks the question, why is SQL Alchemy DB? Okay. So let's back up for just a second here. What the SQL Alchemy is, and you're going to notice the fact that this is being pulled in from Flask SQL Alchemy. So SQL Alchemy is a popular object relational mapper, or ORM, for Python. Now, SQL Alchemy has a lot of great capabilities and so forth that are built right into it. But if you're going to be using it, say, inside of a Flask application, for example, there's going to be certain things that you're very likely just going to want easy access to be able to do. And one of those, for example, will be to be able to, say, return a 404 if somebody punches in an ID for an item that doesn't exist. We also want things like easier configuration for our database. So the Flask version of SQL Alchemy is a superset of SQL Alchemy. You can do everything that you can normally do with SQL Alchemy, but you can also do some additional things, take advantage of some shortcuts, things like that. And so this right here is that version. And so what I need to do, and I need to fix my typo right here, is what this is going to do is, to a certain extent, it's going to bind it, if you will, to the Flask app, and it's automatically going to read certain things out of it. So one of the things that it's going to read out of it is it's going to read the database URI there. So that's what's going on. The DB that I had there was absolutely a typo, and now that I fixed that, we can move on from there. So I told you I was going to make mistakes. Okay, cool. So now that we've got our dog here, what I need to do is I need to go ahead and create my database. And so the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to just drop down into an interactive shell inside of Python and do this in here. So I'm going to say from app import db, and then I'm going to say db.create all. Perfect. So now what you're going to notice is that there is my little SQLite file. And if I open that up, and I sadly don't have a tool installed on my system that I could use. There is a SQLite browser that you can go grab. I just don't have it installed locally. But what you would now see inside of there is a brand new table called dog, and it would have two columns, primary key of ID, and then my name right here. So now that I've got that, rather than appending my dog to my list, instead what I'm going to be able to do right here is I'm going to be able to say db session add in that dog, and then go ahead and say db session commit. So in a nutshell, this is queuing up the insert, and that is executing the transaction. Okay. If you're getting a module not found on that, make sure that you have python .env installed. Okay. So now let's go back over here to our index, and let's go ahead and now read from the database instead. And I'm going to be able to do that by saying dogs equals dog query all. Now, this right here, let's talk a little bit about what's going on. First of all, this is part of that Flask SQL Alchemy that I was mentioning a second ago. This is a little bit of helper. So what query is going to give me access to is basically the query object. And so from here, I could actually go in and say, do a filter or do an order by or whatever else it is that I might want. And we'll see that here in a moment. In my case, I'm just saying grab everything. You probably want to go ahead and do a filter. You could also go in and say, hey, I only want certain columns and things like that. But you want to, but in our case, I'm just going to go ahead and grab everything. That'll actually work just fine. Cool. So then we'll go ahead and now grab all the dogs from the database and pass that in. And because of the fact that we have kept the same model structure, our index should actually work just fine. And let's also go ahead and finish out our details down below here. And let's go ahead and say dog equals, and we'll say dog query find or first or 404. And I'm going to go ahead and say dog ID equals ID. And then I'll say dog equals dog. Okay. So what this is going to do right here is it's going to grab the first item that matches that query. I could also do a get or 404. That would also work, just like that. So I can go ahead and just go grab the dog, and then I'm going to pass that in, and then I'm going to set up the template for that. So what this is going to do, if it doesn't find a dog, is it's just going to give me back a 404, which is great. The question is, can we use vanilla SQL syntax instead of using the API? You absolutely can. There's two things that I'm going to mention about that. Number one is that SQL Alchemy will allow you to still just write SQL if that's what you need to do. The second thing that I want to mention here is the fact that if you want to do raw SQL, you can, but you do have to make sure that you're not doing like string concatenation and things like that. So just always make sure that you're paying attention to SQL injection attacks. Will the dogs be happy being passed into a database? So my vision here is that these are dogs that are being registered for adoption. So I'm going to say yes, that they will be happy being passed into a database because they'll eventually be adopted. Adopt, don't shop. Okay. Extends. Let me finish this out here real quick. Dogs, base HTML. Bloop. And then I'm going to go ahead and say content. Oops, no, block. There we go. Okay. And I'm just going to go ahead and say h3 curly curly dog.name like that. Okay. Yeah, until somebody removes the database. But we could go ahead and deploy this out to MySQL, which hopefully we'll have enough time to do here. Okay. So there is that. I've got my details, and all of that is looking good. So in theory, I give this an 82% chance of working. Uh-oh, what did I do? That's well done, Acid. That's really well done there. I appreciate that. Dog bottle. Why are you... What did I miss? Do I just... Are you complaining about like a silly tab thing because you're Python? Okay, that looks good. There we go. Okay. Apparently there was a carriage return somewhere where Python didn't want it. All right, fine. So What you're going to notice here is now we have no dogs, which is sad. We'll go ahead and say create. We'll go ahead and name our dog Sammy, hit save, and sure enough, we've got Sammy. And then you're also going to notice here that if I go to dogs/1, that it does in fact work. Now, the one little challenge that you may notice there, though, is that I had to navigate to all of that manually. So the last question then becomes, well, how do we then start to create some links here? And the way that we can do this is by using a little bit of syntax called URL4. And what URL4 will do for us is it will generate a URL for, and then the name of the function. And this is the key here, is it's the name of the function. So if I go back to my app.py here, what you're going to notice is that it's dogs details. It's the name of the function, not the name of the route, the name of the function. You're also going to notice that our function is going to need an ID. So I'm going to need to pass that in. And I'm going to do that by saying ID equals dog.id. And let me make sure that I've got single quotes around that. Cool. So now if I hit save here and I come back over to my browser and I hit refresh. Uh-oh. Oh, that's why, because I'm on the wrong page. There we go. Once you go to the right page, so here's all of my dogs. Now you're going to notice that if I hit the link, that it will take me to the details. So I'm going to make that just a little bit clearer here. I'm just going to go in and throw in a real quick H2 all dogs, and then on my details, I'm just going to throw in a real quick H2 dog details, just to differentiate the pages here. Okay. There we go. So dog details, and then here's our list. So now this will actually then take us to Sammy. Pretty cool. So now we've got our full CRUD-based application, or at least we've got the ability to create, we've got the ability to retrieve. The update and the delete could come a little bit later here. Okay. Now, the last little thing would then be to do our deployment. So how is it that we could actually then get this out into Azure? Now, what I'm doing here is I'm kind of moving really quick because I've sadly only got a couple of minutes left here. Is I'm there we go. Is I'm just going to create a web app inside of app services. And the couple of little things that I want to highlight here is that I have the ability to run my code using whatever language it is that I might want. So you are free to use Java or Python or whatever it is that you might want to be able to use for app services. So in no way, shape, or form are you limited to just using .NET. You can absolutely go ahead and use Python. Now this is going to take it a second to create it, so I'm just going to take a real quick sip of water. In the meantime, and I am going to highlight the fact that I did do one big thing already behind the scenes, which is I've already set up the database. The database is hosted in Azure. You're just going to have to trust me on that. So I'm going to, first of all, go into my configuration, and I'm going to create two brand new app settings here for my database. And there we go. And okay. And there we go. Okay. So what I'm doing here is these are now going to become environmental variables. So if you remember going back to that os.getEnv, that's exactly what I'm doing here, is I'm just putting this now inside of app services, and those are now going to be tucked away for me. So it now will just integrate with the rest of my application the way that it is, the way that it's built. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm also going to set up local Git deployment here. And what this will allow me to do is it will allow me to actually just push my code out just like I would with a normal application. So I'm just going to build out a real quick git ignore. I've already got that env in there. I'm using Python. There we go. Okay, create. There we go. And yoink. Okay. So the question is, won't it automatically read the .env? And the answer is yes, it would, but I don't want to push the .env. After all, it's just a text file. So by putting it into the app settings, now it's tucked away, and I'm going to be able to limit access to those values. So that's why I want to do it that way. Okay, so I'm just setting up a normal Git. I know I'm moving fast because I'm supposed to be off the air here in just a second. And then I'll be able to say git remote add Azure, and then let me just grab the URI. There we go. Git push and I'm just grabbing the information from the page. Sorry, I know I'm going fast on this. I apologize. I just don't have a whole lot of time left. Okay, so on this deployment here, what's really slick is it's actually going to do the installation of all of my packages and everything for me, and upload all of the files. So just give this a second here. Okay, cool. So now, now that these are all pushed out, now what I can go ahead and do is to, yeah, isn't that a really slick CI/CD? I love that capability. It's boom, push just like I would to any normal Git repository. I absolutely just love that. Okay. There we go. cd cd site root pip install. Okay, so now, and I know I'm moving really fast, I've just SSH'd into the server. I'm going to create the database, just like I did before, from app import db, db.create all, and of course I'm going to get an error message. Okay, shucks. All right. It does, yeah. Okay, I was moving way too fast, I know, for everybody, and I apologize for that. I was honestly moving like even too fast for myself, because I was trying to close out. We've got somebody else that's going to be coming on in just a second. But what I want to say here, and I'll have a demo later on where I'll actually show off the proper deployment. But what I want to highlight is the fact that you can absolutely use Python on Azure. MySQL will absolutely work on Azure. And yeah, if you check out Microsoft Learn, there's a lot of great demos on there. I hope that you learned something about Flask today. I thank everybody for taking the time to tune in. Check out more Reactor stuff that we've got being broadcast. And again, everything is available on YouTube. Thank you for Megan for hanging out, and thank you to everybody for tuning in. I will hopefully see you all very soon. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.